the superhero genre has become so omnipresent that the subversive tropes have also become just as generic, if not more so, than the original tropes. Case in point would be Evil Superman, where I'd say there are more examples of this archetype around now than the wholesome heroic farm boy messiah that my generation grew up with. I don't know about you young people, but for us millennials, there was a time where the evil Superman archetype was unique, super edgy, and transgressive, as opposed to, the norm. Think about it. In at least the last 15 years, we've had evil pubescent Superman in the movie Brightburn, evil dictator Superman of the Injustice games, evil corporate Trump Superman in Homelander, evil Shadow Superman as the Sentinel in the Marvel Thunderbolts movie, Superman as a 1930s German, Superman as a Soviet communist, and of course, the worst iteration of all, Superman as Jonah Hill. That's super bad! Pardon the cringe. Anyway, even when the original version of Superman is adapted, Zack Snyder can't help but depict him in a cynical and dark light where he's constantly painted as a possible threat to humanity who might go nuts at any moment.
Kal-El, no!
And I love how the show The Boys on Amazon Prime acts like it's so transgressive and unique, but it's in a crowded market even in its own streaming service. I mean, The Boys is so derivative that it's only the second Amazon superhero show with gory violence about an evil Superman trying to take over the world with his superpowered son being the only hope to stop him. And therefore, an alternative paternal figure from the CIA tries to guide the boy away from the path of tyranny, but then ends up falling out with the boy. That's right, The Boys is just a crappier version of Invincible, who in turn is a more sophisticated version of the animated Justice League storyline, where Hawkgirl and her people betray the Justice League and try conquering the Earth. Evil Superman is so ubiquitous as a trope that the James Gunn Superman movie, that is coming out soon, is an incredibly deliberate and welcome breath of fresh air. And most of us are looking forward to it. We've come full circle now, bros, where the subversion becomes the norm and playing it straight to traditional tropes becomes the new edgy subversion of expectations. Can you imagine daring to hope? In this economy? Which is also why Invincible as a show, despite how gory it is still popular. Because it's not really a deconstruction of the Superman archetype that analyzes how so much power within one individual would actually be a disaster as no one could hold his appetites in check. Even though it's also not a straightforward traditional take on wholesome heroism, Invincible is actually a reconstruction that acknowledges the problems embedded within the Superman archetype, but emphasizes how power doesn't have to corrupt you, it can also redeem you. In this show, the Superman archetype is thoroughly explored in almost every aspect, not only in the heroic protagonist of Mark Grayson and his various evil versions throughout the multiverse, but also in Nolan, his father, and maybe some of the other Viltrumite characters. Although evil Viltrumites like General Craig and Thrag are more obviously the General Zod archetype, Zod himself arguably was already an exploration of the evil Superman archetype all those years ago. And I do think Conquest as a character is a major piece of the puzzle in how Invincible as a show redeems the Superman archetype and solves the evil Superman problem of ultimate power corrupting the ultimate individual. When it comes to the appeal of the evil Superman concept, there's not much to be said, because I think we all get it. For one thing, we all fantasize in how we destroy our enemies and take over the world if we had those kinds of superpowers. Don't pretend like you've never done it, but they're also incredibly terrifying when we consider someone else with all that power over us. We know the evil in us, so we know that there'd be evil in the others with power. But the problem with obsessing over the evil Superman archetype is that it assumes that power is always abused, misused, or unintentionally problematic. It's no coincidence that the evil Superman archetype became more popular as society started obsessing more over equality as the answer to social justice. The fear of Superman is literally linked to the fear of inequality. It's in the name, right? The fear of the superior man. But it's also no coincidence that the heroic, wholesome Superman is making a comeback, as people got sick of extreme egalitarianism. Because the thing about power is that it's also the only thing that can implement justice. The fact that some have more power than us isn't the problem, since it's only through strength that you can defend the weak. You can only defend people's rights if there's a group of people stronger than the bad guys capable of defending the innocent. That's the whole point of superheroes as a concept in the first place, and equality is an overrated concept that would not guarantee peace and justice. Thomas Hobbes, the famous English political philosopher, wrote in his book called The Leviathan that all men being equal means all men have the equal ability to destroy each other, causing a natural state of total war between people. Since then, in that case, no one would be strong enough to defend the peace and the justice. The only way that peace can be obtained in this scenario would be by creating a hierarchical power structure where we get together and invest power in leaders who would then have the ability to impose a peace and enforce justice in society. But regardless if you think equality is a good thing or not, the fact is that equality does not exist anyway. And ironically, those who obsess over it often demand that a powerful government institution uses its greater power to impose it, inevitably leading to an unequal outcome as the managers of the state inevitably have more power over everyone else. The fact is that inequality is an inevitable outcome, and it's not the actual problem. The problem isn't power, it's when it falls in the wrong hands. Which is why the battle of Superman demigods fighting each other in the sky over the fate of humanity is such an iconic and timeless storyline. Your Superman versus Zod, Goku versus Frieza, Mark Grayson versus his father, at least in the first season. But this idea of the clash of the Superman in the skies is just such a culturally powerful sight that every generation has a movie or show that depicts these incredible scenes. Invincible vs. Omni-Man was just the latest and arguably one of the best iterations of this formula. And the dialogue itself between these characters is just as much a war of words as it is a physical battle. It's fantastically done, as these two become avatars of the different sides of the argument. And it was this scene that cemented Invincible as a far-reaching cultural phenomenon that gripped our collective imagination. I mean, that's a scene that literally spawned 1,000 memes for a reason. I think it really speaks to something deeply ingrained in the human psyche. Having too much power is insanely tempting, of course. The temptation to do what you want at the expense of other people is, in fact, the real force of evil.
I knew you wouldn't be able to change his mind.
Yeah? How?
Because I've felt the same temptations he has. They're pretty strong.
But an insane amount of power can also be a cause of redemption and purification of your motives, as all that power makes you realize what is actually really important in life, which is actually what redeems Omni-Man and solves the evil Superman problem, in my opinion. Think about it. If you had all the power in the world, what becomes the point of anything? At first, you might use it to accumulate vast wealth, form a harem of sexy redheads around you, and tell people what to do, but eventually it'll get stale, especially if you live for an absurd amount of time. This is the problem plaguing Conquest, and why his "I'm so lonely" speech hit so hard.
No one wants to be my friend. They think I am unstable. Some days I feel so alone I could cry, but I don't. Because what would be the point? Not a single person in the entire universe would care.
Because it's hitting at the core truth about such unlimited power, about being a victim of your own success. And if you'll permit me a vague and mild spoiler, it's also what redeems some of the other Viltrumites later on. Because they're all lonely. Conquest is just the oldest one and desperate enough to share his pain with those about to die. But they're all desperately lonely, man. And not only because they're a dying species on the way to extinction. It's a crowded galaxy out there, man. Plenty of sentient species to form a meaningful relationship with. And a whole planet of sexy humans who look just like them. It's actually just because they're a super powerful culture that dedicated themselves into acquiring external things, like wealth, resources, and power over others, only to realize how empty that makes them. In this circumstance, when you can have everything you want, the most precious resource that exists is something you can't just take, but something you have to genuinely earn, which is something like love. A genuine human connection to people. When you have all the power over things, love is what becomes a precious resource because you can't force it from others. You end up seeing the value of a simple life and genuine connection to people. It's why Omni-Man decided to turn his back on the Viltrumite Empire after he realized that he lost what he had built with his family. This love and connection is also why Mark stayed good and wasn't interested in joining the Empire. He was thinking of his friends and family, which to him was more precious than mere power. Because when you have power like that over others, and you exert it callously, then people around you just feel fear for your strength. Or they become motivated by ambition as they get close to you merely for transactional purposes, using you for their own ends, which is the pain that Homelander feels in The Boys. As disturbing and messed up as the show is, this is the one thing they were spot on with. Deep down, the one thing Homelander craves is love and human connection, but he's not mature or wise enough to understand how to get it, mostly because of the messed up way he was raised, which makes him lash out, hold on to forcefully, or try to use fear or lies and manipulation. But he's just so desperate and needy because in his fame, power, and wealth, genuine love is what he's missing the most. The adulation of the crowd isn't real love because they don't love him specifically, but they instead love an idea in their heads that he represents, and the moment he doesn't live up to their imagination, they turn on him in an instant, which makes it fickle and unreliable. But it's also cheap because it's not a personal connection with his fans. And the more power he gets, like becoming CEO of Vought, the more disconnected he becomes with the people around him, who just become sycophants or fearful servants. It's one of the reasons he reaches out to Sister Sage, because in her super intelligence, she's a bit of an equal, so he can build a genuine partnership with her. But it's a partnership doomed to fail, because it's for the mere goal of getting more power, as if that will fill the massive gaping hole in his soul. And his search for power makes him lose his one connection to his son. The more force he uses trying to grip the hearts and minds of others, the more they slip away, which is the true tragedy of his character. Horrible decisions often come from our desires, disordered appetites, and cravings. They make you look for external validation, pleasure, or material things, rather than look for inner peace, which you find deep within you. It's not that having an insane amount of power over others makes people abuse it. It's the lack of power people have over themselves. Don't be afraid of power. Be afraid of the lack of power over yourself. You guys want to hear a massive white pill? An interesting phenomenon that proves how power isn't necessarily automatically abused is how most people play RPG video games, where you can choose to be good or evil, like the game Mass Effect. The majority of people pick to play what's called the Noble Paragon playthrough, where your character of Commander Shepard is a genuine hero, exerting restraint and self-control. He compromises with the needs of the other characters and looks for the best solution for everyone that can serve the most people as possible, as opposed to being a psycho bastard in the Renegade playthrough. And when I say the majority of people pick this option, I mean the vast overwhelming majority of people. It's a 92% versus 8% split of people who choose to play as genuine heroes, which is interesting, because I mean, why? It's a video game. They're all NPCs, you're not really hurting anyone. And as the player, you have the most power in a virtual world designed specifically to cater to your needs and appetites. If you think anything would reveal the true nature and inclination of the human soul, it'd be how they play a video game. People can literally do whatever they want, but they still choose to act like a hero who cares for the needs of the NPCs who aren't even real. But the answer is simple. People play as Paragon because they don't want to lose or break the connection they make with the other characters. Talia and her adorable, nerdy personality. Morden and his humanitarian hamster on coffee shtick. Rex and his gruff, loyal companionship. And Jack with her crazy punk waifu energy that really got me going as a teenager. You don't want to lose the little moments you forge with these characters for the sake of some empty power moves that don't really mean anything. They're not real, they're simulations, but you prefer the simulation of friendship rather than the simulation of being a dick, doing whatever the hell you want in an empty and meaningless digital playground. Now imagine that you're an immortal force of nature like a Viltrumite or a Kryptonian, or a superhuman lab experiment, and you can see how people around you would start to feel like NPCs. But this also means that everything is within your reach, and so there is no stake in losing things, except for your connection to the people in your life. If you act the wrong way or say the wrong thing, you might lose them forever, which in the very least makes relationships more interesting than just fighting or acquiring stuff for its own sake, if nothing else. Because your relationship with people gives you a reason to fight or to acquire resources for. At some point, with enough power and no real challenges, the simple joys of life that you share with others also becomes more interesting. It's why pretending to be a simple writer on Earth with his wife and son became so precious to Nolan. It's also why Clark Kent became so attached to his adopted parents and their farm. With all his power, he has no real physical needs, so mere wealth and power aren't satisfying. He doesn't need to eat because he can live off sunlight, so there's no point in luxurious foods from all over the world. And also he doesn't need money at all because he doesn't need the comfort it provides, sleep, medical care, or anything. He doesn't need anything at all, not even shelter. He could just live comfortably in the open desert of the Sahara or the frozen wastes of Antarctica. But he'd be lonely. Kind of like us, living in our apartments, living off of delivered food, but not having a single person to talk to. Which is why in the Superman Earth 1 comics, he doesn't use his powers to become a famous American football player or work for a wealthy tech company. He chooses to work in the Daily Planet, which is a dying industry, because he likes the people. Jimmy Olsen, Lois Lane, and whatever his boss is called. Superman uses his immense power to help people and to both preserve and enhance his connection to human beings, helping them be better and aspire to greater things by giving an example to follow but also connecting with them on a simple individual level. It's why being Clark Kent is so important to him, just like being Mark Grayson is so important to Invincible. There's this pointless debate on who's the real person, Superman or Clark Kent. Is the real person Superman and Clark Kent is the mask, or is the real person Clark Kent and Superman is the mask? Well, the obvious answer is, of course, he's both. It's also why the Superman archetype is so associated with Christ, who is both man and God. It's even funny how the debate on whether Superman should be depicted more as an otherworldly superhuman or as the more grounded farm kid is the same discussion around these cinematic depictions of Jesus Christ. Some like movies that show his God side more, while others prefer emphasizing the little human moments. But it's also why many dislike the inevitable Christ imagery embedded in the Superman character, because they feel that it elevates the character too much instead of focusing on the wholesome country boy who's just trying to do good. But they don't realize how well the Christ imagery fits. The cosmic master of the universe who can take over the world if he wants. Ain't nobody gonna stop him. But really, he just wants to enjoy the company of his friends and family, drink some wine, walk around helping those in need. He has the power to multiply objects, command storms, and raise himself from the dead. So he can technically multiply an unlimited supply of gold or crush entire armies if he wants. But why would he?
Don't lift a finger.
That was a warning.
They deserve to have bolts of lightning rain down and incinerate them!
Yes, fire from the heavens.
Fire. I need you to help show the way, to be humble.
A genuine and personal connection with people's hearts and souls is way more valuable to him. And in the Gospels, he likes to remain anonymous as well. When people start gathering, trying to make him king, Christ has to leave the area because he's not interested in that. He even asks people that he saves not to reveal his identity, which of course they do, forcing him to nope out of the area. My point is, Jesus Christ is 100% a man who's a simple carpenter just trying to fix broken things around him, just as much as he is 100% an otherworldly force with a grand destiny. The Christ imagery in the Superman storyline doesn't take away from the simple small-town Clark Kent aspect of the character. The fact that Superman has strong Christ imagery associated with him is not a secret to people, but there is a debate on whether or not that's really part of his character or if it was imposed on Superman for corporate reasons. My fellow YouTuber Pillar of Garbage made a few videos arguing why Superman could not be associated with Christ, even if the original Christopher Reeves movies made that connection and worked well as a film. And he argues this because Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were Jewish, so Superman is not a messiah figure, according to him, but more like Moses. But I respectfully disagree with him. Superman might not have been explicitly a Christ figure at first, but he was always a messiah figure. It was Siegel and Shuster themselves who in 1938 named Superman Kal-El, which is actually Hebrew for voice of God. You know, voice, that thing you used to speak words with, as in word of God. It's just that Superman was the manifestation of the Jewish conception of the Messiah at first, where he isn't a transcendent incarnation of God on earth, but merely a very powerful man chosen by God, meant to fight evil oppressors and liberate the people of God. If you're Jewish and you think I'm mistaken, feel free to correct me in the comments. But the Jewish concept of the Messiah is more of an earthly figure meant to bring justice and peace in society. Sometimes he's even envisioned as a military man who beats up the bad guys, which is clearly at the core of Superman as a character, especially in the first comic books where he wasn't nearly as powerful as he is now. Heck, he couldn't even fly. And he was more focused on beating up corrupt politicians and businessmen, rather than being an incarnation of the very concept of hope. But Superman is also a product of American culture, and was later shaped by writers from a more Christian background, of a Christian majority country. And it was mostly they who made Superman the invincible, overpowered flying man who ascends to the heavens and has a fire coming out of his eyes. And not to mention how he dies fighting a creature named Doomsday, and then is resurrected. It's only natural that the culturally Christian understanding of the Messiah would then be infused with Superman as a messianic figure made in the United States. Saying that Superman isn't a Christ figure because the Christ elements were added later and not by the original Jewish creators is like saying that Superman shouldn't fly or shoot lasers out of his eyes, because those also came later. But these things have become so deeply intertwined with Superman that he would stop being Superman if we removed them. And likewise, the Christ imagery in the Superman stories has been going on before most of us were even born at this point. So it's a little too late to start complaining about it now. And the more powerful Superman became in his depiction, the more the Christian imagery made sense, since the Christian view of the Messiah is significantly more overpowered as a divine being that can rewrite the laws of life and death than the Jewish view of the Messiah as a powerful and chosen but mortal man. And I think the Jesus analogy to Superman is crucial in understanding Superman's relationship to simplicity yet unlimited power. But regardless of what side you take in this debate, it's possible for Superman to be an interesting mix of both the Jewish and Christian understandings of the Messiah. But we have to understand that Superman is fundamentally a modern iteration of the Messiah archetype, regardless of what side you take in this debate. He is, after all, Kal-El, the voice of God, which makes evil Superman inherently connected to the archetype of the Antichrist, which is why evil Superman tends to take over politics and wants to crown himself king to become a tyrant, which is yet another aspect of the evil Superman problem that Invincible responds to and solves. Since, if you'll allow another vegan mod spoiler, Invincible has a character arc where he must become a good monarch to redeem his people and lead them to a better future, emphasizing the positive aspects to powerful leadership, which is in fact connected to the Messiah archetype. At its worst, the storyline that adopts the evil Superman archetype is one that inherently resents power and authority. It's the manifestation of the human fear of these things. But when used well, it's an exploration of the abuse of power or the depravity humans can fall into if they seek control over others rather than control over themselves, especially when contrasted against the good Superman archetype as the two fight in the clouds for the fate of mankind. Invincible as a show is one that faces the evil Superman concept head on, not to deconstruct Superman and explore the supposed problems of relying on a powerful person, which is inevitable and not an issue in itself, but to reconstruct Superman from the ashes of a cynical era. Invincible acknowledges that yes, power can bring abuse, horrific violence, and oppression of the weak. And yes, many people trapped by their own personal weaknesses, sins, and desires would fall into the temptation of misusing power. But justice also inherently exists within the fabric of the reality of the universe itself. Because those who are strong but use their power for evil inherently suffer the consequences of their actions. They are rewarded with desperate loneliness, unimaginable personal suffering, and inevitably face retaliation for their crimes, like the Viltrumites almost going extinct from a plague, specifically engineered to kill them. There is no real reward for acting in such an evil way. It's not worth it. And all it takes is a little bit of wisdom to know that what's actually worth the use of your power is constructive purposes, to connect with the people around you, and fix the issues in yourself before imposing solutions on the world. Invincible as a show is so loved and more appreciated than The Boys and Cynicism because it doesn't go all, Superman would be evil, actually, it's too much power! But instead, it asks the question, why would Superman be good as an individual? It's a cliche to say that Superman is an archetype of hope, but it's true. And Invincible as a story rediscovers this inherent hope. And that's all I have to say for today. A big thanks for my patrons, and thank you all for listening to my ramblings. Have a good day, my friends.